see you guys in the dark.
To start this off, I grew up in the 1970s in a small town in North Carolina. Well, it was almost too small to be called a town, with only a school and a couple of small shops. I'm guessing you can imagine how boring it would be to be a teenager there. And it would have been if it wasn't for the woods. The neighborhood that I lived in backed up on a big forest that spread out for about 3 miles. And it's where I spent most of my teenage years with my two best friends, Levi Gibson and Connor LaChance. They both were in my class at school, and we were all 15. Levi lived across the street. He was smart and kind of quiet, unlike Connor, who lived down at the bad side of the neighborhood. Connor was a troublemaker, getting sent to the dean's office at least once a week. He was loud, obnoxious, and a natural leader, always finding something for us to do, be it legal or not, when he was around. We were never really bored. It was the beginning of the summer holidays, and Levi had called for me. We went down to go get Connor, who was messing around with his younger brother's scooter in the front yard, and we asked him if he wanted to go in the woods. He said, yeah, of course. In case this may be necessary, Connor had almost black, shaggy hair, and the most beautiful eyes. One was a light blue, while the other was a brownish color. He always wore scruffy red Converse shoes, and a denim jacket, and of course, I had the biggest crush on him. While Levi had styled brown hair, brown eyes, and freckles, he was considerably shorter than me. And then there was me, a red-headed, brown-eyed girl that quite a lot of people were scared of due to my hyperness. I was always ready to go somewhere or do something, and I was always talking about something. Anyways, we made our way into the woods and started walking into a random direction. We did this for fun, as it meant that we could usually get lost and have to find our way back, which most of the time just led to us being late for dinner and getting sent to our beds early, or worse, getting grounded. But we did it anyway. We were making our way along a deer trail that I didn't think that we had ever been on before, when Connor found a pile of shit, and of course dipped a stick into it and began chasing us with it. Levi and I, of course, freaked out and scattered. Neither of us wanted to be smeared with this. I ran off, and luckily for me, Connor followed Levi instead in the opposite direction. After a while of them not coming back, I began to think that they had left me, and I was furious. I was walking down the way that I had seen them run, when suddenly something stuck out of the bush and grabbed me. I let out a surprised yelp, and Connor shushed me, only for me to shout at him for scaring me. Only when I saw the look on his face, I decided that I shouldn't be talking, and I shut my mouth. Connor whispered to me, "You have to go see this," and began to lead me through the bushes. The further that we went, the more I could smell something disgusting. Finally, we came upon an almost green Levi, staring at the ground with a weird expression on his face. I was about to ask him what was wrong, but Connor tugged me past him a few feet away to where there was a ditch, and in that ditch was what I could only describe as something out of a nightmare. It was a body. It was a purple-blue color, and it almost looked swollen up. The stench was now terrible, and I had to cover my mouth with my jumper, so not to gag. I backed up to where Levi was. Connor stood, looking into the trench for about 5 more seconds before he walked back over to us. "Pretty cool, huh?" he said with a grin. Levi gave him a disgusted look before saying, "No, it ain't cool, dude. We need to go home and call the police." "What? Why? What do you mean?" "There is a body dumped into the woods, Connor. It's clearly been murdered." "No, man, it's so cool." "We can't go get the police. If we do, they're going to think that it was us who killed her." "Why would they think it was us?" "Because that's what the police do, man. Don't be stupid. Connor, you can't stop me." "Fuck's sake, man. If I get the police out here, it will be on the news." "Everyone will get questioned. They will probably put out a curfew, and they will ban us from going into the forest. There will be police everywhere, and the summer will suck." I had just been quietly watching the argument take place, not really caring what happened. But that got to me, and there was no way in hell that I was going to let my summer get ruined. Connor's right. "What? You're not serious, are you?" "Levi, we have the whole summer left. Do you really want to spend it inside? Yeah, man, 2 against 1. Come on. Don't do anything stupid. Levi looked crushed. Fine, but I'm not coming near this thing again. Connor had let out a whoop of joy, and we made our way home listening to him talk about how it would be our secret. Well, the secret didn't last very long, as by the end of the week, Connor had shown all the rest of our friends, and it's a miracle that nobody did call the police. But I guess that just shows how close everybody was. We were like a big family, and like most families, we had our secrets. The body remained there for the rest of the summer. I only went up a few more times, and it had gotten less interesting each time. According to Connor, there was only bones left. Anyway, on the last week of summer vacation, we decided to have a big camp out with all of our friends. There was me, Levi, Connor, Josh, Walsh, a very loudmouth boy with mousy brown hair and blue eyes, Alice Haley, a quiet girl with straight brown haircut with a neat bob, Courtney Rhea, who I would describe as the only girl that I actually saw as a friend, probably because she was the only one who put up with my bratty attitude. She had long brown hair, almost black hair, and brown eyes, and also had freckles dotting her cheeks. Then there was Kenny Stokes, the kid whose garden we were camping in. He had sandy blonde hair, brown eyes, and freckles. His dad owned the biggest garden, so of course we had to camp there. And as an added bonus, Kenny's garden backed right into the woods. And even though he had promised Kenny's mom that we wouldn't go into the woods after dark, we were planning to anyways. But unfortunately, our plans were foiled by good old Mother Nature, as she had decided to make it rain. So all of us piled into the biggest tent, to which belonged to Courtney, and played cards for about 2 hours, making up new games with crazy rules. Josh even suggested that we play strip poker, only to have a shoe chucked at him, and to be told that if he carried on acting like a pedo, we would send him home. He quieted down after that, and we carried on playing until Kenny began complaining that we were going to run out of oxygen. This went on for about a good 10 minutes before he decided to unzip the tent and stick his head out so that he could breathe. Hey guys, the rain stopped, said Kenny, excitedly. Hey, seriously, I said. Yeah, let's go do something. We all argued for about a good 20 minutes about where we were going to go and what we were going to do. So far, breaking into our school and hanging out there was winning, until Connor had said, "Why don't we go see the body?" That was it. Everyone put on their shoes and coats. Kenny took out his dollar store flashlight that he had hung up from the roof of Courtney's tent, and off we went. Connor and Kenny led the way. But Kenny's flashlight, let's be honest, was pretty shit, and didn't light the way very well. And I don't believe that we needed it anyways. Because even though I hadn't been to the body in weeks, it was burned into my mind how to get there. The whole way there, we were talking about what it would look like now, and how creepy all of this was. Then the conversation took a turn that it never had before. We began talking about who we thought was the body, and why were they dead, who murdered them. And this scared me, because it made me see for what it really was, a dead body of a murdered person, hidden by somebody in the woods, and we had never reported it. I brought this issue up to Connor, who simply stated, "It's too late now. It's probably only bones left, and if we did tell the police, we would get in trouble for holding off for so long." To this I remained silent, and kept walking alongside Courtney and Levi, listening to Josh telling Alice some bullshit story behind us. They soon went silent, though, as we came to the ditch. Connor and Kenny stood silently at the edge, shining the flashlight into it, Kenny's mouth agape in horror. I asked what it was, and Connor shushed me, and then beckoned the rest of us over with his finger. As I came to the edge, I saw what they had freaked out about. In the ditch was something piled on top of the original body. It was wrapped in a yellow floral pattern bedsheet, and it was tied with some sort of string to stop the sheet from coming away. Everyone stood silent for what felt like hours, but in reality it was probably only a couple of seconds, before Connor pulled his Stanley knife out of his pocket and descended into the ditch. Levi began to protest, but Connor turned and shushed him, whispered for Kenny to shine his light on him, to which Kenny obeyed Connor, then cut some of the string, and pulled up the sheet until it revealed the face of a young girl. She stared up at us with dead, glazed-over eyes and a blank expression. I felt like I was going to be sick, and apparently so did Levi as he began to violently reach out. He turned away. I couldn't turn away no matter how hard I tried. I was just mesmerized. Connor suddenly jumped back to look of a sudden realization, and horror crossed his pale face as he began to stumble up the side of the ditch. Josh helped him up, and of course what happened? What is it? Whatever it was began to only have him frantically shushed us, and with a shaking voice he said, "It's a dry bone." A feeling of absolute dread settled into my stomach, and if you don't get what a big deal this was, it had rained only an hour earlier, everything was wet, and this body was dry, which means that it had to have been put there recently. Everyone was silent. Then there was a noise behind us, across the ditch. My heart was in my throat as we turned around. Kenny quickly pointed his flashlight at where the noise was coming from. Then click. Suddenly from across the ditch came an extremely bright light illuminating us, and making the person holding the light impossible to see. "Run!" yelled Connor, grabbing me by the arm, and everyone just sprinted. And whoever it was with the light sprinted too, their light swinging violently as he ran, randomly illuminating trees and bushes and scaring the shit out of some deer. Then suddenly, it went off. I felt my heart stop, and Connor was muttering, "Shit, shit," or "fuck, where is he?" under his breath as we ran for our lives. I tried listening to hear if whoever it was behind us, but all I could see or hear was my pulse racing. Everything was beginning to go blurry as we crashed through the tree line and into Kenny's backyard, to be greeted by Kenny and Courtney. Levi stumbled, and a couple of seconds later, face streaked with tears of fear, followed by Josh. We huddled together, and everyone began blabbering about what the fuck was going on. Who was that? And what do we do if he finds us? But then Courtney spoke up. "Where's Alice?" Everyone went silent and looked towards the woods in fear until Levi spoke up. "Kenny, go get your dad." Connor looked over to glare at Levi before turning to Kenny and barking, "No, Kenny, don't get your dad. Let's think about this, okay?" "What the hell do you mean, think about this? He will call the police, and do you think the police are going to believe us?" "Yes." "No, they fucking won't. Look, we're going to wait for about 5 minutes, and then we can go get your dad." And for some reason, we waited 5 minutes. Soon it turned into 15, and then Connor reluctantly turned around to us and let out a defeated sigh. "Kenny, go get your dad, but you tell him that we were playing tag, and we ran into the woods so that we wouldn't get caught, okay?" Right. Now Kenny's dad was a terrifying man. He was 6 foot and built like a tank. He was also an ex-Marine. So Kenny began pounding on his back door. And this goes on for about a minute before Mr. Stokes threw open the door, face red with fury. "What the fuck are you playing at, boy? It's 2 a.m. He hollered, "Dad, Alice is in the woods." "What?" "She ran in there when we were playing tag, and she hasn't come back out. We think that she's gotten lost, Mr. Stokes." He stared off into the woods for a bit, squinting, trying to see beyond the tree line before muttering an okay, and retreating into his house only to return 5 minutes later with a big flashlight. He stomped off into the woods. We all waited for about 20 minutes before he returned and said, "Fun's over, kids. Go home. Get your fathers and tell them to bring the flashlights." And that was it. We all went home and told our parents what was going on, and all the men went out into the woods to look for Alice, while the woman stood around in Kenny's backyard, while we were all told to stay at home. To which I didn't. I crossed the street and knocked on Levi's door. He answered, and I stepped aside. Apparently Connor had the same idea as he was sitting on the sofa in Levi's sitting room, eating some chips. "Do you think that they will find her?" I asked quietly. "Yeah, she's probably just panicked and got herself lost," Connor said. "And what if he got her? What if she's dead? What are you going to do then?" Levi then stood by the window, looking into the dark street. "Then we keep to our stories. The same thing that we told everybody. She ran off into the woods and didn't come out. That's all you say." Suddenly the sound of the police sirens cut through the air. "Oh no," mumbled Levi, as the police drove down the street to Kenny's house. We watched as 2 police cars pulled up, and the man got out carrying big flashlights. They walked around the back and into the woods. After that, me and Kenny went home, and I watched out my window as suddenly 5 more police cars appeared. My parents came home at around 6 o'clock that night. I asked my mother what happened, and she told me that they found a body in the woods, and that it wasn't looking good. The next day, the police interviewed all of us, and we stuck to Connor's story. They didn't find Alice. And just like he said, it would be there on the news coverage, a ban on us going into the woods. And there was a curfew for 9 p.m. When we went back to school, there was assembly on safety with strangers. They found Alice in the end, 12 days later, chopped up into little pieces, and crammed into a garbage can on the side of the road 10 miles from her house. I have my own kids now, and have since lost contact with all of my childhood friends, apart from Levi, whom I now have a child to, and he recently told me that Kenny had been killed due to an overdose. We were invited to the funeral along with the rest of the kids that I grew up with. I will not be attending that funeral at all. I used to live in Japan, but recently moved to a town somewhere in America. At our town, there was a story going around that a cult had a cabin somewhere near the woods, and they were doing incantations, summoning spirits and specters, the usual paranormal stuff. Me and my friend Jack, whom I had met when I first came to town, didn't really believe in the paranormal, so when we had an opportunity to do so, we would every so often camp near the section of where the camp was rumored to be and search around for it. It didn't take long, since on our 5th time we found where it was. The cabin was completely hideous. It was infested with cockroaches, spiders, and even some centipedes. The left side of the cabin was decayed slightly. The right side had a bit of a termite problem. At first it looked like an old run-down cabin. Then we took a second, much closer look. That was when a horrid stench hit us. It was horrible. I gagged, and I almost vomited. We opened the door slowly. That was when I couldn't take it anymore. I vomited into the grass just to the left of the cabin. The reason that I vomited was even worse than when the stench was outside. Just at the front door was a dead dog. It had been butchered and left to rot. Worst, it was a local dog that had went missing just 2 days before we found the cabin. Jack gently pushed the dog to the side so that we could get inside. He waited a bit for me and kept going. Inside was like the exterior. Only exception was blood-red ruins replacing the bodies. We came into the main living room of the cabin. It had a big ritual circle. The walls were different too, this time now sporting words such as devil, the beast, our master, the end, and much more terrifying words, such as the runes and eyes. It was blood red. Except this time it seemed like this was real blood. That was when I figured out that the other drawings were simply dried and didn't look as clear as these. The more I figured out, the worse I felt. If the others were dried, wouldn't that mean that these were just made? That was when I had it. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned to the cabin doors, and what I saw I can never unsee. A tall, slender figure covered in intestines, blood, and organs. Everything that was gross and putrid. It was blocking the cabin door. That was when I screamed as loud as I could. I turned back to look at Jack. Though he still looked like Jack, the man that I was looking at was carrying a knife. He had a grin on his face, widened by the second. I backed away from him, but he grabbed my arm and dragged me closer. I struggled, trying to get away, but his grip was locked firmly. I watched in horror as the knife was raised. That was when I made a last-ditch effort. I kicked him in the forbidden zone, which worked, and I ran towards the direction of the door. That was when I bumped into the slender figure once again. Now I can make out its face. What I saw was not human. It looked like the face of something out of the deep depths of hell itself. I shambled back a little bit, then remembering Jack was there, I moved to the right. I found a window, the only window in the entire cabin. I tried and tried to open it, but it simply didn't budge. I turned back in shock as I realized that this was how I was going to die. I was going to be murdered in some satanic cabin by my friend. I crouched down, now in tears, and closed my eyes. I waited for the knife to end it all. I waited, but eventually nothing happened. So I slowly opened up my eyes and saw that it was daytime. Jack, or what I believe was possessed Jack, had collapsed on the floor, still clenching the knife. The slender figure was gone. I tried at the window again, and now that it was daytime, I saw that it was locked. I unlocked it and opened it up. How silly, I thought, that I didn't check for the locks. I made a mental note to always do that, and then proceed to exit via the window, carrying Jack through it first. I ran to our campsite, put Jack in his tent, and went into mine. I recapped on what happened, and then put this in my diary. Though this wasn't the nearest near-death experience that I have ever had, it was definitely the most extreme and grotesque. I waited for Jack to wake up, and then headed back to town with him. I never told anyone what had happened, and definitely didn't tell Jack, who is now my best friend of all time, that he almost had killed me. We usually started the day by finding kindling, so that we could add to the wood that my uncle would chop for the night's fire. Shortly after arriving, and picking up as many sticks as our little arms could carry, my cousin said something, which I immediately responded to. She said she felt like someone was watching her. The hairs on the back of my neck were already standing up before this, but after she said it, I got a little scared. We went to meet with my brothers to investigate. We looked around the camp, searching for signs of other people, houses, animals. Nothing was found. We were in the middle of nowhere, 3+ miles from any kind of road or life. The day moved on, but something didn't seem right. I remember feeling like I should have looked over my shoulder constantly. I was getting a bad vibe, something I knew wasn't right. Sure, my cousin had said something earlier that didn't help, but why was a sixth sense seemingly telling me something? I didn't know what it was. After setting up camp, we all decided to go for a walk down this very close trail. After walking about 10 minutes or so, we came to this clearing. The trail stopped and opened into a large field with a single red barn on top of a hill. This was very odd, as there were no houses, let alone roads for a few miles in any kind of direction. The strange feeling returned, and this time, it came to all of us. After some deliberation of whether we should check it out, we decided to head back to camp. For the rest of the day, we hung out by the fire and just talked. As the night approached and the sun finally had set, we stuck close to the campfire and started to forget about it. Forget about the notion that something strange was going on. Then it happened. My uncle was particularly sitting on the hood of his car when he felt it move. He said the front felt like it was dropping. I remember him thinking that it was his brother trying to sneak up on us. Our other uncle was the only one who knew about this particular camping spot. It happened once again. This time we could easily see the car dip, and it could have taken 3 or 4 men to make it drop that far. The hood was hitting the dirt. My uncle had slid off. Not knowing what to do, we heard thuds of something running behind the car. We were frozen with fear, and there was nothing that we could do. The only weapon that we had was an axe, which was laid next to a tree somewhere back there. Suddenly, the most frightening moment of my life was before me. I grabbed my flashlight, pointed it over in that direction. All I saw was 4 beady eyes, all standing about 5'5" to 6'1", staring directly at us. I screamed for my cousin and my uncle to just run. We all hightailed it further into the woods, hoping that those people would not be following us. We all jumped into a bush and laid there in wait. After what seemed like forever, my uncle decided that he was going to get up and look around to make sure that nobody was around. While we were waiting for my uncle to show back up, my cousin stares at me with the most terrifying look that I had ever seen. My heart at this time felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. We hear a bunch of footsteps walking past us. We hold our breath, hoping that nobody looks inside of that bush. After what seemed like forever, Our uncle pops his head into the bush, tells us that we need to hurry up and run back to the car and leave now. We all run as fast as we can to get back into the vehicle. We leave everything behind. My uncle starts up the car and immediately drives off as fast as humanly possible. To this day, he never told us exactly what he saw, if he saw anything at all. Growing up, every summer in July, my family would get together and camp out for 2 weeks at White Lake State Park. Some of my best childhood memories were made there. Rollerblading, Nerf gun wars, flashlight tag, and water balloon fights with my cousin and neighboring kids in the campground. When I was around my late teen years, my family stopped gathering together to camp out after my grandmother passed away. One of the last years I was there, this was one particular memory that has stuck with me. A little over 10 years ago, I was 16 years old. It was around 10 p.m. at night when I noticed I had a missed call on my cheapy little track phone. My family was sitting around the campfire cooking s'mores and sharing some laughs, so I decided to go off and get some privacy to return the call. I took a long, narrow trail that winds in between other campsites that at the end leads up to the bathroom. I wasn't going to the bathroom, I just wanted to find an empty campsite and sit at a picnic table and make my call. There was plenty of those, since this whole side of the campground where I was headed was vacant. There was no other campers nearby in that area. It was quiet and dark, so I chose a campsite. I sat down at the table. The lights from the distant bathroom from up to the top of the hill behind me were all illuminating my surroundings just a little bit. I called my friend and was carrying on a conversation for around 20 minutes. As I'm sitting there, staring straight ahead, I see a silhouette coming down the road in front of me. The figure is coming towards my direction, where all these empty campsites are. I could see that it was a person. It's not that unusual to see people strolling through the campground for a night walk. The people I see usually have flashlights, though. This person did not. I wasn't creeped out at this point. No really reason to be. I just watched curiously. As the person got closer, I could see a better outline, and that it was a man I was looking at. I also noticed his pace slowed down. I kept my eyes fixated on him as I continued conversating on my cell phone. A minute or two passed, and now he stopped moving. He's just standing there in the road looking straight into the campsite where I'm at. I don't know if he knew I could see him. He was staring straight at me, and I was staring right back at him. He was a little heavy-set and tall. I could also make out that he was wearing a light jacket. I couldn't see much for facial features, but I would guess I was staring at a man in his 30s or 40s. Alarm bells were going off in my head now. My mind had turned to mush at this point, and I'm frozen solid. I was no longer listening to what my friend was saying on the phone. I was in a stare-off with this guy. Then he started to move again. He was tiptoeing towards me, very carefully, like he didn't want to make any noise. He put one foot in front of the other, leaned forward in a slight hunch form. It looked like he was about to charge me. In that moment, I snapped out of my mind-frozen state and leaped off the picnic table and started running through the campsite back towards the trail. I could hear him trampling behind me, leaves scuffling, heavy yet fast footsteps. Footsteps were getting louder and closer. I made it back to that narrow trail. Once he got close to where I was, I heard the sound of twigs snapping and an oof noise come from the man, which I can imagine maybe he tripped, or almost tripped, or maybe got face slapped by a tree branch. Most likely, he wasn't familiar with the trail like I was. Whatever the reason was, it caused him to stop chasing me. I didn't stop to look back. I just kept running and running until I made it back to my family's campsite. When I got back, they were still sharing laughs and smile by the campfire. I broke down crying, and I was trembling. I explained what had just happened to me. My aunt spoke up and said, "Oh geez, he probably thought he knew you and was coming to give you a good scare as a joke." She just dismissed me. My cousin chimed in and said, "Yeah, he probably stopped running after he realized that he didn't actually know you. He probably feels dumb now. They all chuckle about it and change the subject. I think I was dismissed because no one wanted the good vibes of the night to be ruined, and the fact that I'm just a socially awkward person in general. I'm very cautious and shy. For that time being, I just let them convince me that I was just overreacting and overthinking. But here I am years later, looking back and shaking my head over all of this. I wish I was taken seriously, but other than that one thing happening, it was still a great trip. It was time well spent with my family. My experience makes me think twice about going for a walk by myself anywhere. I carry pepper spray and a mini keychain alarm on me now. So, Mr. Campground Chaser, let's not meet again. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.